very much for having me, everybody, and thank you there to Andrew for that I guess, scene setting, which is very, very useful for me, because I'm going to talk to you about not just one part of the EO world, and I think part that perhaps maybe we don't see quite so much. I mean, we at the moment physically don't see it, many of us being trapped in our homes as we are, but also it's not where we live. We live on the land, so we understand and have this connection to the land that we don't necessarily have to the oceans. So I'm hoping that through this talk I can convince you a little bit to come over to the dark side, if you like. And if you look at the signal to noise ratios we're getting when we're talking about ocean Earth observation, it certainly is the dark side. But hopefully I can convince you that there's a lot of interesting things to be done in the Earth observation world when it comes to the oceans. And that is my job, effectively. I am a marine applications expert at UMETSAT. So we operate a variety of different satellites. Predominantly, you might have heard of us through the work that we do with weather satellites and the weather forecast sort of side of Earth observation, a bit of climate as well. But we're also more and more involved in things like the Copernicus program and more in ocean and atmosphere monitoring. And the ocean side is where I sit. And I basically kind of work as this interface between the organization and anybody outside of it who's using our data to help them use it and to take whatever they learn from it and feedback into the different structures that operate the satellites and process the data. So I do a whole bunch of different activities in my job, but I do this from Darmstadt. I'm based in Germany at the moment, which is about as far away from the sea as you can get, which is quite ironic for marine scientists, but I like to say I see it from the office every day. So yeah, in a nutshell, this is the kind of stuff that I do, but I don't really want to talk to you too much about exactly what it is I do on a day-to-day basis. I kind of want to talk to you more about this. I want to get you more interested in what the ocean can tell us. And I said before, the ocean is this kind of dark, maybe slightly blank space on a lot of maps, or maybe it's blue, maybe it's slight shades if you've got a bathymetry or something going on in a map. But I personally like to look at it from the perspective of its color. And if you look at the color of the ocean for long enough, you'll find out that it's not really blue. In fact, in many cases, it's a whole bunch of different colors. And this particular example here, this some of you may know, is the coast of South Africa. This is just south of Cape Town. And you can see very clearly there what I'm talking about, in that there is a huge array of different colors that the ocean can present. And colors in this case, as they are in many cases when it comes to Earth observation, are information. And in the case that we have here, what you might notice most strikingly is that the ocean is red, which is definitely not particularly common, but very, very interesting and very, very relevant. So if you've ever had the pleasure of visiting this coastline, you may have enjoyed some of the amazing seafood that it has to offer. It's a very, very rich, productive area of our oceans, very huge fishing industry and aquaculture growing all the time. But that industry, which is vitally important for the economy of the country and the well-being of the people, can be threatened by what you see in this photograph here, which is the red tide, or harmful algal bloom, as it's also known. And on the inset there, you can see a gentleman who's picking up, these are rock lobsters, which have been affected by not this particular bloom, but one like it slightly further up the coastline, where the decay of this bloom has caused all of these lobsters to walk out as the waters become depleted in oxygen. So this is one effect that these blooms can have, but it can also cause, if any of you have ever got sick after eating mussels, it can also cause things like toxic shellfish poisoning. So this information that we can get from the color of the ocean is vitally connected, or intimately connected, with these very important and very visceral ways that we are implemented in the ocean as society. And so for me, this is really compelling. I kind of came to ocean sciences, being interested in the ocean, but also realizing that we get a lot from the ocean as society. And so this is how kind of I ended up in Earth observation, actually. And as you can see from this picture, which is actually taken from a helicopter, you can also see this information from space. But I'm not going to go to space just yet. I'm going to go even closer. And actually, the little creatures that are causing this color are these tiny microscopic algae or plankton species, such as the ones you see in this microscope image. And it's always struck me that it's quite incredible that these things that are utterly microscopic, really. You can't see them with the human eye. You have to have quite a powerful microscope to see most of them. Can affect the color of, vast bodies of water to such a degree that you can actually see it from space. And that's what you have in this image, which was the background to my first slide. This is not Southern Africa. For anyone who's more familiar with the Baltic Sea area, this is sort of the central part of that area, just north of Sweden. And the algae that you see here are a different type. They're cyanobacteria, one of sort of the oldest, most ancient organisms on Earth. But they particularly turn the water this very, very vivid green. And in this data from the Sentinel-3 satellite, which is one of the ones that I work on, particularly at EUMETSAT, you can see very clearly how we can map these kind of behavior from space. And we can actually do that now, and have been able to do this for a little while. So we can actually look really globally at how these plankton, phytoplankton, are behaving all around the world. And there's a number of applications that come out of this. Obviously, we talked about the harmful algal blooms. But in terms of, if you notice the sort of movement of this map, you'll see it's kind of like a breath. This relates to the absorption of carbon dioxide and the emittance of oxygen into our atmosphere, as well as a whole bunch of other gases and nutrients that are cycled in our oceans. So this is vitally important information for understanding how our globe and our oceans in particular function. But this data can be exploited in a whole bunch of ways. So this is where I come from when it comes to Earth observations and the ocean. And how that data is collected. This animation you'll see here is again of Sentinel-3. And Sentinel-3 has an instrument aboard it called the Ocean and Land Color Instrument, OLCI. And it collects color-based information at different wavelengths, as you can see it doing in the animation. And hidden within the information within those different wavelengths is information about blooms and plankton and other things that are in the water, as you see in this example here. So that's just one type of Earth observation that we have for the oceans. And of course, you may have heard that there are various others as well. And in fact, on Sentinel-3 itself, it's not just an ocean color satellite mission. It also has an altimeter package on board for measuring sea surface height, has a sea surface temperature sensor as well as the ocean color. And this is just one of a fleet of ocean observing satellites that we have, and a growing number that we're getting more and more of all the time, thanks to things like the Copernicus program and other missions. You may be aware that this week on Saturday, everything going well, we will have the Sentinel-6 satellite launch, which is another altimeter, which will work with Sentinel-3 to provide that sea surface height information. So you have all these different types of measurement that we can use to observe the oceans. And I think, as Andrew was saying, one of the really powerful things about this is we can start bringing this data together to derive information that is actually physically useful for people in terms of the decisions they're making. And the summary here just shows really the vast array of these different applications, all of which have strong sort of societal relevance that we can access using ocean Earth observation. So everything from, detecting ice and various other maritime safety parameters to protect our shipping industries and life at sea, to storm formation and warnings about that, to disaster response, understanding climate predictions, estimating where we can or shouldn't be fishing rather, how productive our aquaculture industries are likely to be, the impacts of coral bleaching from increased temperatures, and various different things can affect human health. These are just a small snapshot of the different applications that we can use Earth observation for in the ocean environment. As Andrew said as well, we really do have this problem though at the moment, which is we get these absolutely huge volumes of data, and we have to try and get that down and distilled into information that people on the ground can use. And as you'll have seen from some of my examples, the people that really need to benefit from this data or could benefit from this data are not necessarily your classic kind of geo-Earth observation geek types. They're fishermen or they're people, captaining ships. So how do we actually get that information down and distilled? And that's an ongoing challenge for us. We have ever-growing volumes of data, which presents its challenges as well. And so we have these very long now, or we're starting to generate, which is great, these very long, what we might call value chains, for actually taking this information that we're getting from the satellites run by agencies like the one that I work for, down into decision making. And I wanted to come back to that original story when it comes to aquaculture to bring this one home. And this example of a value chain really is focused on that. So you can see that, you know, some of the data we might use for aquaculture purposes might be Sentinel-3, as I've shown, you know, produced by us at UMETSAT and then sent out of the building to a variety of different people. And as you step down this chain from the right of the image down to the left on the slide here, it has to go through all these different people and experts in order to distill that information down into the core value that will help people to make decisions. So from us, it goes, you know, down into sort of scientific institutions who will check the validity of the data, offer improvements in the algorithm, maybe derive estimated products for different factors, different variables that we're interested in, and then into the hands of other experts who understand maybe the systems more, sort of ocean scientists, but particular backgrounds. So people who maybe understand the types of algae that will affect the aquaculture industry, and so can estimate from the data we're giving whether those algae are present or not and how often. And then from there, it has to pass out into sort of more distilled forms that are delivered in various different ways that can be accessed by members of the public, members of the industries that are could use this data, for example. So we have a lot of people who are working on things like getting the data into apps or down into indicators that can be as simple as a text message they're received by a fisherman. And then ultimately, if we've all done our jobs correctly throughout this value chain, this data gets down to the people on the far left of the screen there who are, in the case of the aquaculture industry, you know, our sector stakeholders. You know, people like the gentleman in the first slide that I showed, you know, with his rock lobsters, or mussel farmers, or people trying to grow lobsters for aquaculture purposes, or even the insurance industry. This is one example that I worked quite closely with, and you can see the little snapshot from a news heading there where there was a huge bloom that caused $800 million worth of loss from a single algal bloom in the Chile salmon industry. So we're not talking about small sums of money here, but knowing that these blooms are coming and how to avoid them and how to harvest early and affect your business practices can be incredibly valuable and save lives and livelihood, because we're talking both here about human health and economics. So this is just one example, but there are many of these, I think, throughout the kind of ocean earth observation value chain that I hope would convince you that the oceans are not just this, you know, faraway beautiful thing we look at when we go to the beach. They're actually really, really clearly integrated into things that matter to us as people on land. So how can you get involved in sort of earth observation stuff for oceans? I've provided a whole load of links here, which I hopefully can share with you afterwards. You know, we provide a lot of information about Sentinel-3. Within Copernicus, we have a whole marine service that's dedicated specifically to getting this information out there. We're involved in cloud processing platforms, which particularly have this data, and we're trying to adapt those processing platforms to be specifically beneficial for working with that data using our expertise that we have from the partner organizations. If you have questions about this data, we're very open to and offer, we offer a huge amount of user support directly one-on-one to people who want to work with the data. And we try and promote sort of training activities and things. We have YouTube channels, we have MOOCs that we've run, we have different training events, we have free Python code that's open for people to use. So if you're interested in any of this that I've talked about today, you know, please get in touch. We welcome especially people coming from sort of different disciplines that can bring the things that they know about into our field as ocean earth observation scientists. So those are my contact details, and I'll leave it there, and thank you all very much for your attention.
Thanks very much, Hayley. Very, very nice. Stephen, what do we have in terms of questions?
So Hayley, in the value chain, how far down the value chain does the data stay open?
Oh, that's a really, really great question. I guess if we go back to that, I can kind of show you. So it depends a little bit. I mean, so from our point of view at our end, when we're doing things with Sentinel-3 with Copernicus, it's open, and it's open to the point where, you know, you're getting derived products out. So actually what you see there under thematic subject experts, things like chlorophyll estimates, they are actually included in a lot of our free data. And some of these examples of these projects are done at a government level. So the bottom example there, which is actually that area of Southern Africa that I was talking about, the one in the center there, that is data that is freely open to the public because it was invested in as a government strategy for blue economic growth. So that's free. The other part of the data analysis that you see in this particular example, the sort of risk indexes that we were doing, and the web page that you see just to the left of that there, these were a commercial service that we eventually offered to sort of conglomerates of aquaculture stakeholders. So there, that data was paid for their own use. They shared it as a sort of conglomerate through their association freely amongst the different farms that were part of it, but they paid membership fees and things like that. And then below that, there's another example, which is from the US EPA. So that is then again freely open. So it depends a little bit on who's paying for what level of customized service, I guess. So the more customized it gets, the more money there is, as I think as Andrew said before, to be made from this. It tends to become a bit more private because you need to sustain as well the actual activity.
Okay.
But a lot of what people are doing is, I think, in principle, as open as possible, which is, I think, a very good thing.
Okay, that's great. So I've got loads of questions for you here. So I'm going to ask you to give me nice short answers to these.
Okay, I'll try my best.
Okay. Mark wants to know, is the new 15 centimetre sharpening via Maxar actually useful?
Oh, I have not had any experience with that, so I can't really answer that one, I'm afraid.
Good. That's a short answer. Sean wants to know, will the self-sustainable commercial market for EO emerge in the next 5 years without government market subsidisation?
Oh, wow, that is a big question, very difficult to sort of answer. I would say probably not. I think we're still at a point, I mean, especially from the ocean perspective, where that value chain is so long, the connections have to be made. So I think investment at this point is really quite crucial. We're starting to get there now. We're only still quite early in an operational sense for using satellite data in ocean science and ocean management, I guess. So I expect that we would need a bit more support.
Okay, I've got two more for you. Alistair wants to know, is it possible to predict an algae bloom using Earth observation?
We've been trying, yes. So they're complicated biological little beasts. So they have, they tick in different ways. So you need to know your regional area quite well. But by combining things like estimates of like the physical situation, so in the South African example, which is actually what I studied during my PhD, we could produce kind of quite reasonable estimates of what time of year we would expect them to be. And if one started in a certain place, we could then predict where it was likely to end up in effect using a combination of the detection from the optical and prediction based upon, remote sensing or reanalysis and modeled currents. Right. So yeah, you can do an amount of prediction. It's not perfect, of course. There's a lot of factors to take into account, but you can get somewhere towards it.
And one day maybe you'll even be able to ameliorate it.
Yeah.
So the last question is from Christopher, who wants to know, what's your personal favourite use of the data?
Oh, it's probably got to be this one. I mean, it's the one I worked on the longest, the kind of harmful algal bloom stuff and the water quality. I find that really kind of quite a compelling. I mean, it's just, I find looking at these images utterly fascinating and beautiful. It tells you so much about how the ocean ticks just by looking at that. But also the fact that it is connected, to the things we eat, the water that we swim in, the places we go on holiday, the smells that you get at the beach, right? It really is very viscerally connected to that experience I have of the ocean as well.
Okay, Hayley, thank you so much. What a passionate enunciation of a really arcane subject that probably none of us have thought about very much. Thanks very much.